Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Simpler Education Series webcast. Today's webcast is titled Mapping Your Journey, Productivity and Self-Care While Working Remotely, with speaker Donna Goestenkors. I do want to take a brief moment and make sure that everyone on the webinar can hear me. We have had issues in the past with audio, so I do want to make sure that everyone on this webinar can hear me okay. If you don't mind chatting in, that would be wonderful. I'm not getting any chats, so hopefully everyone can hear. Okay, awesome. Well, with that, I want to start with some housekeeping items. At the end of this session, we will have time for a formal Q&A, but feel free to ask any questions as they come to mind via the chat box located on the right side of your screen. You can also access this presentation in NAMS CEU in your GoToWebinar control panel. We will also send you an email by the end of the week with a link to today's webinar, your certificate, and a link to the presentation. Additionally, Simpler.com features a wide variety of COVID-19 resources featured on the Simpler.com homepage, as well as Simpler.com/COVID-19. With that, we are so pleased to have Donna as our speaker. Donna Goestenkors is a consultant, speaker, author, educator, and mentor with more than 40 years of knowledge and experience in the medical staff services industry. She has an expertise in virtually every type of healthcare organization, including hospital systems, medical staff services departments, CVOs, managed care organizations, and more. So with that, I'm going to let Donna take it over. Take it away, Donna.
Wonderful. Thank you, Steph. And I offer a warm welcome to our many listeners. My name is Donna Goestenkors, and it's a pleasure to be back with you again this month. You know, initially, today's program was going to be about mergers and acquisitions. However, in consult with Simpler, we agreed that a topic of greater relevance, not only to those of us in healthcare, but to the professionals across the world who have been impacted by COVID-19, was much more appropriate. Some employees we know, and some of them may be us, have been furloughed. Some of us have been directed to work 100% remotely, while others of us are working on a rotation schedule, and yet others have had to face decisions about our positions actually being eliminated. So whether you're attending by choice, necessity, curiosity, or want to work more effectively in your current work environment, this program was built especially for you. You know, during the past couple of weeks in particular, I've heard from many of our MSP colleagues with stories of sadness, of significant change, but also those of great inspiration. They just warmed my heart. As the graphic on this particular slide reveals, there is always something that we're faced with that requires us to change and grow. No one can escape the reality of COVID-19, but how we each navigate this unique experience is truly our personal journey. Mapping your journey to greater contentment and wellness during this time involves understanding that there really is a science in working remotely. Of course, there are technical considerations, but also emotional ramifications that we must deal with, and that program is going to be the blend of both of those. I've been working remotely now by choice for 15 years. Since the declaration of a national emergency came to our Americas, I've been asked to develop 3 transitional plans for remote work, remote workers, and schedules, 1 for a large CVO and 2 for medical staff services departments. And also in 2019, I worked with a client in hiring the very first full-time remote worker for that organization. So my journey of remote work is built upon my personal experiences, the lessons that I've learned, and the stories that I'm sharing, in addition to the research involved in producing content for this topic, which serves again as a perfect blend to get us all thinking in a different way. This program is always brought because of the voice of the MSP, meaning those of you who are our listeners, our very loyal listeners. This idea of maybe having a program about a remote worker really was sparked by suggestions from the field. Simpler jumped on board, and of course, Team Med Global wants to be part of the solution to challenges that we deal with. What we're going to do by way of true content for today's session is we're going to help describe for you elements of what makes a productive remote work environment. Some of these things might be slam dunks, but some of them might be aha moments for you. We're going to identify for you some of the essential skills that are required to truly be an effective remote worker. And then we're going to provide strategies on how you can improve the connection and communication with members of your team or your colleagues, especially during this time of crisis. So let's prepare ourselves to learn and to grow, right? Because every challenge that we are faced with, they truly are our opportunities to grow. So really, what is remote work? Well, now's not the time to be asking that because we're actually all living it, right? Whether it's personally or professionally, each of us, every one of us, is in the same boat because we're having to do things, live our lives, work in a totally different way than we were just, a month ago, maybe 5 weeks ago. So this, again, is an opportunity, sort of a passageway for all of us. Perhaps working from home might become our new normal. I just heard from a colleague yesterday who said that their CEO contacted her and said, is it possible that you and your department, she works in the medical staff services department, in fact, she's the director, is it possible that you and your department and all of your team members could continue to work remotely for the next month to 5 weeks? So hospital administrators are truly looking at, and I don't want to just kind of single out the hospital administrators, healthcare workers, business leaders, they're all trying to contemplate, what impact this is going to have on their workforce. So it's time to just kind of hit this pause button, and I believe that you're doing that, right, by participating in the webinar. We're wanting information. We're wanting some guideposts. So perhaps working from home is going to become the new normal for many of us. Let's talk about statistics and remote work and what this really means, right? America has 160 million American workers, and this was all before COVID-19. So 160 million American workers. 4.3 of those work remotely. So that's about a 2.7% workers who are working remotely of our entire population. Now, we know that the statistics will change post-COVID, but right now we're in active mode, so statistics aren't available. But just think about this, this before picture. 44% of employees before COVID did not allow remote work. Wow, Has that ever changed, right? We've all been forced to change. Those people working in a more of a conservative type of thought process by leaders who never thought that success could be achieved through remote workers are having to kind of a paradigm shift for themselves. So as dust begins to settle, recovery begins to occur, there may be, and I really know that there will be changes in not only how we as the workers receive our jobs, but also the employers. Their look at how we can become more effective for our organizations. 16%, again, before COVID, 16% of full-time workers were full-time. So again, these statistics will all be changing. 77% of those working remotely indicated that their productivity had increased. 82% of those surveyed said that they felt happier being a remote worker. And the impact to the employer is that employees who have been working remotely will remain in that remote position for 5 years or longer. So retainment is a feather in the cap through this experience. Now, again, there's a lot of variables happening right now. It's difficult, not only for our national leaders, right, but it's difficult for our employers and even ourselves, for our own personal families, to really make a decision that we feel very confident in, because things are changing from moment to moment and day to day. But again, this is information that we can all utilize to try to make the best decisions that we have available to us. I thought it was really important also for this program to let's talk reality by way of myths that we hear about remote work. Well, the only people who want to work remotely are lazy. They don't want to come to the office because they can just, horse around or not be as productive when they're working from home. Now, again, remember, these are myths. Another thing that we hear often is, oh yeah, they're not going to be able to produce as much work because they're going to, what people perceived of me when I first became a consultant is that I would be sitting on the couch eating bonbons. And to tell you the truth, I'm a hard worker just naturally, but when I became a healthcare consultant, I became even a harder worker. So I feel that people, when many times, and this is an overgeneralization, so you have to know yourself and you have to know your environment and your employer. But for me, when I became a remote worker, I worked even harder. So productivity was not an issue. There is a sense of loneliness, but not everybody feels that separation, right? So even though you might hear that, some of you might be experiencing it, but some of you may not be experiencing it. So again, these are myths. Improved work-life balance, that is a myth. Yes, many of us enjoy working from home, but because we can be much more productive, the balance to when to turn things off. Oh, I'm going to do one more email. Oh, I'll do one more. I'm going to make one more phone call. Where it's easier when you have a regimented day and your clock out time is 5 o'clock, you really try to stick to that pattern. So it's not always necessarily the case that you have an improved balance in your life. There's also a sentiment that people who manage others have to be in the office. And for those of us who have been managers and have been working remotely, yes, there are challenges with that, but we know we're also effective. So, that's a fallacy that we don't have to embrace. And heck, now that you work from home, you have time to do your nails and you have time to go exercise. Well, it's all about scheduling, right? And right now there's nothing open. So really we don't have moments where we can actually test that myth out, that you're going to have more self-care time. Because again, through I guess the current situation, this brings anxiety because we're not living we're kind of in a holding pattern. So we're not really living how it would be in real life. So I think, again, just recognizing that there are myths that we probably, many of us, have already dispelled and sort of obliterated in people's reality. What are some of the changes when we work remotely? Well, we're working too much. And I can only speak for myself. I think that is true because the work is always here, right? It's kind of in your face. So having a schedule, truly being disciplined helps kind of curb that. The prioritizations, because you see kind of the map of everything that has to be done. Sometimes prioritization of your projects can get a little cloudy, but all of these things that I'm going to be addressing with you as a challenge, these are things that we have to know that other people have experienced, so we want to be sort of ahead of the curve, right? There is a lack of human contact, and for those of us who are more introverted, that is something that we kind of like. Hey, I don't have to see all of these people. I can just not be disturbed. I can buckle down and do the job that I have to do. Where those of us who are more extrovert, oh my gosh, there is a longing, right? Oh gosh, I just want to. I'm used to walking in the hallway and seeing Dr. Smith and Administrator Jones, and so it's really an adjustment. And for a tattling experience for me, when I became a healthcare consultant, it took me 6 months truly to kind of work out my grief because I worked with this team of professionals for over almost 29 years. So I would see various physicians throughout my day, my team of people, some of the administrators, and people you develop relationships with. So I had to redefine what my world of connectivity was. For me, being a healthcare consultant, now I've been able to redefine it because I have colleagues all across the country rather than in just one organization. I work with various organizations and lots of medical staff, physician leaders. So my office, in a sense, has become more global, but no, I feel the pain. Once I got through that adjustment, once I kind of redefined that I wasn't doing without, I just had to look at it differently. You will do fine. But please know it's okay to feel sort of that loss because it's true. We are feeling that. We just deal with it differently from person to person. Another challenge with remote work is that we feel sort of out of the communication loop. Even though you have access to your emails, right, and communications, it's just different. Sometimes we learn things just through conversations, picking up the phone and talking to someone regularly. So we do know that that's a challenge, and we have to work really hard. And I would say that that's one of the biggest challenges working remotely, outside of that lack of human contact gap that you feel. It's really making sure that you work really hard to keep those relationships live and nurtured. Another component is not having a routine. It really, really is hard for people if they're used to getting up at a certain time of the day and their work hours are from 8 to 4, taking breaks throughout that day because they have the luxury of, going downstairs and throwing a load of laundry in, or making sure, the children have lunch, or taking care of, an adult parent. There's all kinds of personal commitments that we have. And when we work at home, I have to say that was one of the things that my family had a little bit difficulty in adjusting to, because I work from home frequently. they think that they can stop in any time. And of course, they can, but I'm not always going to be available to chat with them. So making sure people, your loved ones, understand that there really is a routine. You're obligated really to do your best and to be a good champion of your organization's expectations. So, that was a quick fix on my end. And for my own benefit, I know there are some remote workers who stay in their PJs a good portion, maybe of the morning, who maybe don't clean up or put makeup on. And all of those things are okay if they're okay with you. For me, I knew when I came out of a very routine type of environment and more of a conservative environment where I worked for many, many years, I knew that in order for me to be successful, I got up at the same time. I got dressed. Now, I didn't get dressed like in something, a suit or a pantsuit that I'd wear to work, but I'd dress up in nicer clothes and I'd put makeup on and I'd fix my hair. And I did that again for probably a good 9 months until I felt like I could be trusted, in a sense, to use my time properly and wisely. So these are just tips that works for me. That might not be an issue for you, but sort of knowing if you're struggling, try to get into the best or into a routine as best as you can. Making sure you have proper equipment at home in your home office is so critical to your success. A lot of the organizations, I'm hearing from MSPs saying that their organizations haven't really had like a remote policy. So these employees are being expected to pay for their paper. They're being expected to pay for their printer cartridges and maybe their internet. So understanding that there might be a financial implication, put that on your discussion list with your managers, because that is something that the organization needs to really come to terms with about what seems like a fair situation. What might be fair in one geographical setting or one facility may not be fair to another. And I say very frequently that you all know your cultures best. You know what they're willing to consider and what would be a real risk for you to bring forward. So, again, use your good judgment, use your good critical thinking skills, but having the proper tools and equipment are essential. If you don't have the best willpower, if you think, okay, once I take care of that one project, I'm going to go take a power nap, or it gets to be lunchtime or maybe a little bit after lunchtime and you're calling Uber Eats. These are all real things that people have done because they're telling me these things, right? And some of my research kind of revealed that. You have to do the best that you can to be as disciplined as possible if that's one of your weak areas. Now, with challenges that we have and myths that we've talked about, let's talk about benefits, because of course we're all experiencing the positive side, right, of being able to work from home. It is more convenient. We don't have to commute to work, and depending upon where you're geographically located, sometimes that travel into work can be an hour or more, bumper to bumper traffic. So that's a factor. You have to kind of weigh that. Golly, this might be the way to go, and to be kind of a negotiation point as we begin our recovery. Yes, we can save money because we're not paying for gas and the wear and tear on the car. So that's a plus. We have increased comfort because, hey, we can wear our tennis shoes and our exercise clothes. And sometimes that can even make us more productive because we can be more relaxed when we're working. I can basically, so long as I get my project of work completed, I can basically work the hours that I want to and the schedule from day to day that I want to. Now, not everybody has that I guess I want to say flexibility. Sometimes there are employers that really expect the hours that you are working during your regular workday, you're going to be expected to work those things. But these are all ideas, right, that you can use as part of your discussion. Many MSPs that I hear from, they feel that they can target more of their energies on specific projects. So something that would take them a number of hours to do, they're able to get those cranked out more quickly because they're not being interrupted by other people, and they're not being interrupted by phone and various emails. So they have a lot more attention to details. They feel that their error rate has also decreased. They love the fact, meaning our colleagues love the fact, that they really can slot their projects as opposed to always being delegated. You have to do this project next. Stop what you're doing, now do this project. That they can really get their scope of work from their manager, and they can rearrange it in a manner that they feel that they have more power over. There are times, when you're working from home, you can, start boiling your potatoes for supper while you're in between processing emails or projects. So you do have more time to work on smaller personal projects. And as I mentioned, many of our colleagues say that they're less distracted. Now, not everybody has had that experience because the children aren't going to school either. So many parents are having to homeschool their children, or they have adult family members living with them that they have to care for. So again, it's all about helping people understand what you're trying to accomplish working from home, what you're being expected to do, and kind of let's negotiate this on how we can work together to meet the need. Now, the benefit side to the employer, and I'm sure that there's more, but right now I couldn't get a lot of feedback from administrators about what the benefit would be. But the one is, the overhead on expenses. And we already learned through the myths, right? The opposite of the myth is that there is an improved retention. The statistics bear that out. And then employers are also having to expand their bandwidth because more and more of their employees are working from home. So they've had to create pathways that they didn't naturally have to create, which in a sense is preparing them for other technical challenges or expectations coming down the path. So that kind of paints the picture really of the positives and negatives. But let's start talking about our environment. What can we do to really create an effective office landscape? And the very first priority is, I'm saying, identify what your workspace is going to be. Where is it going to be? And try to remember that routine that we're trying to establish. Try to make it the same place as frequently as possible. That is your workspace, whether it's the dining room table or the family room or a downstairs bedroom, or if you're lucky enough to have a home office. Making sure you have a dedicated workspace. Make sure you have proper lighting. That's going to help also with your mood. If some of us are lucky enough to have a beautiful view, arrange your desk or your table in a place where you really have the opportunity to see some nature. Or if you have a pool and that's kind of your motivation. Okay, I'm going to do this one project and then I'm just going to go jump in the pool. So whatever sort of floats your boat, that's what makes working from home so neat, because it's not like one size fits all. When we're talking about your workstation, of course, you have to have a workable phone. You have to be able to have access with security and logins to whatever programs you are required to have access to at work. You want to have a printer, a scanner, and supplies. What I'm seeing from a lot of organizations is that they will provide all of the access things. They will provide the laptop, but they're not going to provide supplies for the printer or I should say supplies for this equipment. So anything added to the basic laptop and the phone, they're not going to provide. Now, if you're lucky enough to work in an organization that has been very forward thinking or have attacked the remote worker more aggressively and they have this kind of nailed out, that's great, because then you're not living in this gray area. Many MSPs are incurring expenses that they wouldn't normally have incurred, and there is no direction from the employer. So again, make your list, keep it handy, because as recovery occurs, it's worth having, a conversation about. When we're talking about other tools, these items that are highlighted is everything in my almost 15 years working from home that I've worked in and that I would recommend. Everybody has their own sort of satisfaction level, but no, Zoom meetings, GoToMeeting, WebEx, Teams is a Microsoft product, and Skype, all of those have the ability for us to meet electronically. I'm sure there's others, but those are the main ones that I've experienced and actually worked with and would recommend. There's all kinds of immediate chats, right? So you can stay more connected to your team members. And I have to say, the client that I'm working with on site now, that's what, when they're scheduled to work remotely, that's truly what they're working with. They're working in teams, and they really love that modality. But texting and Slack, live chat, WeChat, and Teams, again, those that are highlighted are things that I have personal experience with. I hear about Slack a lot, but I've not known anybody who's used it. So some of you may have a personal experience you'd like to share. Project management, and I'd have to say, again, outside of the communication value in your remote experience, really making sure you work hard to stay connected, and the initial phase of adjustment on the emotional disconnection that you have. The question that I get most from our colleagues is, gosh, Donna, do you have a report that I can measure the productivity of the remote worker? And I said, yeah, an Excel spreadsheet would work, but I would really recommend that you automate that process. And they go, well, what do you mean? So project management, and if I've been talking about project management for, at least 10 years, right, on how important it's going to be for our industry, for our colleagues to be proficient in project management. And I truly believe that this is sort of going to be the next iteration of how we can improve our productivity and also generate reports about productivity. Any one of these products that you see under the bullet of project management would be worth exploring. I personally use Trello in my client projects as well as my personal business. And that way we can all communicate with one another, no matter how large the team is. You can identify projects, you can identify deadline dates, people can provide status reports. So I like that one the best. I've also worked in Paymore and Basecamp, but Trello to me was the easiest. But I know a lot of my colleagues, they like more bells and whistles on their things. So, go ahead and explore and pick the one that you like the best. They can also be used for personal matters, right, for a personal schedule and personal accountabilities. When we're talking about shared documents, the two that I have the greatest depth of experience is Google Drive, which allows one to be looking at a document and we can work with and make revisions within that same document live. It's really cool how it works. And then Dropbox. I'm sure many of your organizations have shared directories, so that's a benefit Not all organizations do have shared directories, so just know that that improves our efficiencies when we use those types of tools that I have listed here. Again, as we move into the Q&A portion of our program, if anyone has any other tools that they have tried and that they would recommend, this really is about how we can help one another during times of uncertainty. And really, we're exploring a whole new avenue of our careers. All right, so we talked about the tools. Now, as far as skills, what do we as professionals, and many of us on the phone are medical services professionals, but not all of us. Sometimes we have healthcare administrators or physicians or even business professionals. So the whole scope of what Simpler is doing by providing this outreach, it continues to expand beyond healthcare, and I think that's the really exciting part of collaborating with Simpler. But what skills do we need to know to be a good remote worker, a high-performing remote worker? Well, none of these will be like revelations of, oh gosh, I never thought of that. These make it so transferable. So what you're doing in your regular work environment can truly be transferred into your remote environment. So I know there's not a learning curve with these. You need to be highly organized. Remember, we talked about having a routine. Be highly organized. You're going to have to be flexible. Trust is critical. You have to believe that your manager and your organization trusts you to perform at a high level, and you in turn, or they in turn, have to trust that you are performing at that high level. I've said frequently already, but no, communication has to be frequent with those who are working remotely. And if you as the manager are working remotely and you're doing a rotation on a rotation basis, know that you have to be reaching out to the people who are in the office. They want to hear from you. That's sort of establishing or re-engaging their routine. So make your communication, whichever manner you choose to do it, voice to voice, by text, by email, whatever you feel is going to be receiving the most positive reaction, because everybody prefers a different level of communication, right? So just make it frequent, be very clear and concise. Don't go on and on and on and write 3-page emails. Make them as bulleted as possible, and always convey that you're a team player. Now, some people are very fearful of going into work because of the health risk, right? Not everybody has that sense of fear, but we have to be respectful because everybody's situation, everybody's health risks are different. So we want to be empathetic and really listen to what our workers' needs are and being responsive to that. We want to try to make sure, again, these are transferable skills. We want to be motivated. We have to sometimes motivate ourselves. Sometimes a deadline, a boss will come in and say, hey, how close are you from finishing that project? Well, we don't have that luxury. So we have to stay on the button and make sure that we're not only meeting those deadlines, but exceeding them. You have to be comfortable working independently. And not everybody is. If you know that that's one of your weaknesses and you don't have such a fear about going into work, maybe you could be one of the people who volunteers to work 100% in the office. If that's something that you're not able to do because of your fear of any health risk, then working independently, maybe you have a buddy system and you have them check in with you like every several hours and say, hey, you were working on project X, how are you doing with that? So there's all kinds of tricks that we can do to keep ourselves held accountable. We have to be good researchers because we're not going to have all of the tools that are at our fingertips at our job. So being a great researcher is going to be important. And again, how I've mentioned how important it is that we maintain relationships. We have to do outreach to others, to our fellow team members, even to our supervisor, because they have that responsibility of making sure all this stuff happens. Maybe every so often just reaching out to them and saying, hey, how do you think things are going? Is there anything else I can do to help you? It makes them feel like they're not so alone in this process either. Being proactive, making sure you use your time wisely, meeting deadlines. And that's been what's been so inspiring when I'm talking to MSPs and managers and directors of departments and VPs. They're saying that their employees working from home, they're delivering on their projects earlier than anticipated. So this is all good stuff because whenever we do something well, that becomes a negotiation point for us as we go through our recovery. And then the self-management piece, looking at our balance and our confidence. I shared with you kind of all strategies and technical pieces, right? What your landscape at your home should be. But truly, the thing that's almost more important to me is how we're managing these things as human beings, because we're not robots who go into the office and do our work throughout a day and come home, get up the next morning and start again. We are human beings. This whole experience, right, has created topsy-turviness in how we feel about ourselves, how we feel about our job, and how we feel about others. So there's always going to be in the group, and it could be us, so we have to be willing to look in the mirror. Oh, brother, this working from home, that's not going to work. I'm just going to volunteer to be the on-site person. Those people are just going to mess around. They're not going to get anything done. I'll be the person who stays at work. So the statistics that I've provided, the data that I provided with the myths, the challenges and the benefits, these are all things being, I want to say information, valuable points of information that can help you as an MSP believe that it can work. So you don't have to be the sacrificial lamb that says, okay, I'll be the one in the office. If you have flexibility and the option to kind of give the rotation a try, go ahead and give that a try. But we have to try the best that we can to approach this with a very positive mindset, because truly, when we're out of our norm, we can become depressed. And we, meaning all of us, Simpler, me, we want to help you be as strong emotionally as possible, because many of you are carrying the burden for your entire family. And there is a phenomenon that happens when we're working from home, and this is based upon science. So as I say in all of my programs, don't just trust that what I'm telling you is factual. I mean, look some of these things up. Everything I do is based upon research and my personal experience. So this is that blend of magic that happens. But this imposter syndrome occurs for people who are working remotely. All of a sudden, they're doing their job, but they're thinking, gosh, maybe I should be working harder. Gosh, maybe I'm not being as valued as the go-to source as I would be if I was working on site. Somebody's going to realize that I'm not really as talented and as qualified as I thought I was, or as I was projecting. And then you begin to have self-doubt, and it's a downward spiral. All of these thoughts keep replaying and replaying in your mind. And then you begin to feel lonely and more isolated and disconnected. And truly, that's what the government is kind of talking about, and maybe even your local governments or your healthcare organizations. We have to look out for each other because we are performing a valuable task for those of us who have been fortunate enough to retain our jobs and working in a remote situation. Or if you're kind of the only one holding that burden on site at your jobs, you can also start feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm the only one doing this work. And everybody else has free time that they can do. So you start to get resentful. So truly what we're encouraging through this program is to help recognize that this is sort of something that happens. And the graphic that you see in this picture, the one on the left, when we begin to feel more isolated, we begin to feel less value and, oh my gosh, I guess I'm just, processing these applications, and I'm really not interacting with other people, and they're doing all these other things, and I'm doing my one piece. And that's the message that we keep telling ourselves. But the picture on the right is really the reality. We're the nucleus. No one else can do the job like we're doing it. And it's important that we do our reach out. So every petal on that daisy is an outreach that we should be making with others so they understand that the work we're doing still truly is impacting the work that they're doing. So we're all playing an important piece or an important part in this challenge during these challenging times. What do we need to do to help kind of curve this emotional downward spiral? Positive self-talk. For those of you who've been on my self-care webinars, you know how important we reinforce that. It's so vitally important to be telling yourself positive things. Gosh, I was really productive today. Golly, that was a hard project. It would have taken me all day to do that if I was at work, but it only took me, half the time. And we want to try really hard not to be judgmental, but be empathetic. We want to be able to say with confidence to our employers, I was productive today to the best of my ability. It's so important that we stay active. And I know all of us are limited on where we can go. Maybe outside of grocery shopping, there's not a whole lot of other places that we can go. But it's so important. Go out, walk in your backyard, or if one of your parks is now open, stay as active as you possibly can be, because when you're active, it releases endorphins in your brain, and that helps calm the anxiety that you might be feeling. Eat a well-balanced diet and drink lots of water. That's another one of the benefits that I see working from home, is that you truly can make healthier choices than when you're at work. And then staying connected. And it doesn't mean as a manager, for those of us who are managers and leaders, when you're reaching out to your employees, you don't just want to talk about work, right? You want to make your conversations more conversational. Hey, how's the family doing? Any changes in what's happening in your work world? Maybe the husband recently lost his job, or maybe he's been called back to work. So try to do kind of a mixture of the work and social situations. And I guess really the last piece, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, because when you get the PowerPoint, you'll be able to use the elements that I've outlined within this PowerPoint. But one of the very key tools that needs to be produced regarding remote work is having a policy. Now, many organizations don't have a policy. So you guys are all kind of creating things as you go along. But whatever your experience is, jot items down, because you can develop a mock policy that when the recovery is in full steam ahead, you can be showing and introducing to your manager or to your administrators that you have been thoughtful in this experience. And if you like it, that can be a selling tool for you. And if you don't like working remotely, at least there's a policy in place that can be considered for future or newly hired employees who want to work in that way, or current employees that find themselves really enjoying that experience working from home. So what should a policy include? And I think before we identify what those elements are, we need to understand that there are three types of workers. One that works exclusively on site, one that works exclusively remotely, and then the hybrid. And the experience that I'm personally having is the hybrid. I'm helping an organization through COVID-19, and we are working, meaning the team and I are working on a rotation schedule. So identify what type of employee staff you want to have in your organization or in your department, and then begin developing your policy. I've created sort of examples of what you would want to put under these policy headings, right? What's the purpose of this remote work policy? What stakeholders or who's going to be impacted by? What elements should this policy include? How many days a week? How many hours per day? What days per week? So that's the area where you would include all of the specifics. And then there should be a working agreement between the manager and that remote worker. And these, again, are just things that can be part of this agreement that will help you. And I think really, as I said, I don't want to go through each detail because I really want you all to be able to kind of use this as a guidepost and then develop your own. You want to address the compensation and benefits. This is where you would cover any related costs working from home and what equipment is going to be provided to you as a remote worker. And so I hope that you find that that piece was helpful for you in kind of at least beginning, right, your mock policy. And then the very last piece is strategies. Remember how I said how important it was for us to have communication and connectivity strategies? Well, that's true. So we want to make sure that we're proactively communicating with our team. Now, some people schedule daily huddles, some people don't, but whatever works with your culture, I would encourage you to continue to do that. You want to make sure now that we're kind of in the groove about working remotely, make sure if there needs to be any course correction that we do it at that point. Be clear about setting expectations and be empathetic when you're working with each other. Ask your boss, ask your team members, what is their communication preferences? Some of us like email first, some of us like to be called, some of us like texting. And we should, to the best of our ability, honor that, or at least have a team agreement about what the sequence of contacts are going to be. So people are always going to be available. As managers, we feel more out of control, right? When people are not really working in our same space. So there's a temptation for us to be micromanagers, but work really hard against that. Give folks the scope of projects that they're responsible for, and again, use your project management tools to measure their effectiveness. Watch your tone. It's easy to become frustrated because we're all kind of living through an anxiety. So it's easy for us to become easily frustrated. But before you pick up the phone, just vent out your frustration, maybe in the mirror or at the wall or outside, and then contact your team members or a manager. Because again, it's being empathetic. This experience is uncomfortable for all of us. And then just encourage each other as frequently as possible. And again, you know your team members best. You know what makes them tick. So whatever you know brings them joy, try to find that and make somebody's day a better day. And I think the bottom line for this program is really, when you're working remotely, just work like no one's watching, and things will get done and the work will continue to flow. And for those of us who've enjoyed the experience working from home, maybe during the recovery phase, that could be something that's approached more favorably than what had been considered in the past. So with that, I'm going to ask Steph if she could begin to collect questions, and I'm going to reveal our next session. Actually, is next month, May 21st, and it's really about working with multi-generational team members. So mark your calendars for that session. And Steph, I'm going to ask you if you could please say a few say a few words about Simpler.
Absolutely. If you're struggling to keep up with your primary source verification or payer enrollment needs, our team is here to save the day. Reach out to Simpler CVO for fast, accurate, and scalable credentialing and enrollment services. Bonus, we can work in any provider credentialing software platform, so it's easy for you and your team to track along with our progress. Get in touch today at hello@simpler.com. And next, we're going to head to the Q&A section. All right. Donna, we do have a few questions. How can a team be effectively managed remotely?
Again, I think the very first thing to explore, if your organization does not have a project management tool, that would be the very first thing that I would recommend. Talking to the team about how important it is that we be as productive as possible, asking them what their preferred communication style is, and that includes you as the manager as well. It's not just a one-way street. Some people like people to check in on them daily. Some people would, are cool about not being checked in, but, maybe once a week. So you have to have those kinds of conversations with your team members about what really is going to work best for the team that you have to work with. And I understand not everybody are happy campers. Some people think this is silly. Some people have a financial, burden and the pressures on that. But again, we're all in the same boat, and it's about being empathetic. It's not just one person's way. As a manager, we're expected to get the job done, but we want to do it with as much grace and consideration with our team members as possible.
Thanks, Donna. Another thing that was chatted in, and this is from Rochelle, she said, this isn't really a question, but she had really great feedback that it may be difficult to identify if you really enjoy working remote during COVID, because a lot of people are being pulled in many different directions, like teachers due to schools being closed. So they may not be getting the best picture of working remotely.
I think that's a very accurate observation. And in a way, that's what I feel the positive side to this experience, because we've all been forced to do this. And by participating in this program, you're hearing a little bit more about other people's experiences and what kind of the science is behind that. And yes, we're all working under an unusual situation. And some of you may come out of this saying, I don't want anything to do with that. Well, others, again, it's piquing your curiosity, and some of you may really, really love it. So I guess I want to say, don't feel badly. If this is not your cup of tea, it's not meant for everybody. And if you need sort of the energy and the action that your regular office situation creates for you, then definitely through the recovery, going back and establishing kind of a new routine is going to be something that you really are going to gravitate toward, because, we're not robots. So everybody has their own preferences about what works best for them and what doesn't. And again, we imagine being in a household with people that we dislike, being at work with people that we have to interact with every day that we dislike. So we have options, and that's what's so great about America. We do have options.
Awesome. Another question, this is from Bonnie. When you are not in the office and do not see physician leaders in person to review confidential documents, what do you suggest for a secure share of these documents to ensure confidentiality and peer review protections?
Another great question, and when I was listening to your question, my heart kind of hurt, because that's the thing. We as MSPs, especially those of us working in medical staff departments, that physicians are one of our lifelines, and that's why it took me such a long time. I thought 6 months to really stop grieving about that and just kind of redefining it, because those physician leaders are the people who would validate my competence and, hey, Donna, you did a great job on this. So if you don't have the luxury of communicating or seeing regularly those physician leaders, using those meeting platforms is one fun way. And then again, having the electronic evaluation. I know there have been organizations who've been talking for years about creating an online platform for physician leaders to evaluate credential files and review minutes. Well, this is forcing us all to, and it might not be ideal as far from a security standpoint. That might not be ideal at first, but you're putting your toe in the water and you're kind of testing different scenarios out. So I say try it and start off small and just continue to keep adding and growing that.
All right, I think we've got time for one more, and then any of these questions that we haven't had time to get to today, I will make sure I share these with Donna after the webinar, and we will definitely follow up with you. So our last question is from Paula. Our remote desktop app slows down mouse and keyboard usage and freezes up a lot, possibly depending on the number of users given at any time. Any suggestions with coping with technology glitches and challenges that are a component of daily work?
Yes, I am hearing that, and I'm actually experiencing that myself when I'm keying in to the client that I'm working with. Unfortunately, and it sounds like you may be kind of in that gap, many organizations, they were caught totally flat-footed, and so their bandwidth doesn't really respond right now to all of the needs that the organization is demanding of them. And again, this is one of those discussion points with your manager or with an administrator. The response that I get frequently right now from administrators is, "Gosh, Donna, I really can't address that now," and it doesn't help us as the worker because it's kind of delaying our process. But I think just making sure people are aware that that's a reality, and if you're experiencing those delays, my belief, logic would tell me administrators and physician leaders are having that same frustration. So just kind of hang in there and make sure, again, it's a discussion item for future.
All right. We will also be replying to these questions after this webinar. I'll follow up with Donna. And then just as a reminder, a recording of this webcast will be archived at simpler.com, and we will also be emailing out a copy of this presentation, as well as your CEU certificate and your certificate of participation. So with that, I think we will let everyone on with their day. And Donna, do you have any last words?
I do. I just say, hang in there. I really do care about you. So hang in there. We can get through this together, okay? Bye. See you next month.
Excellent points. Bye. Thanks, everyone.